Today's webinar, our topic for today, addressing the digital transformation mandate. So a timely topic, an imperative, a mandate for organizations of all sizes to get and the efficiencies around a digital transformation. And we'll talk at a macro level today, but we also want to take a particular focus on middle market challenges from a procurement perspective. And for them, the digital divide may, in many cases, be greater just due to fewer resources at their disposal. So we're going to cover that topic today. Before we get into the content for the session, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First of all, any questions that you may have as we go through today's presentation, feel free to log those in the Q&A chat box. We'll do our best to address as many questions as we can, time permitting. And another question that's frequently asked with these sessions, yes, all attendees will get a copy of the slide deck as a follow-up after today's session. So first, let me introduce the speakers. My name is Richard Waugh. I'm from Zycus, your host for this event. And I'm pleased to be joined by Konstantin Limbarakis from the Hackett Group. He's a senior research director at Hackett, and he leads the development of intellectual property and research, leveraging over 15 years of experience in supply management, where he's played strategic roles across a broad spectrum of organizations, including functions such as consulting, product development, and market research. And throughout Konstantin's career, he's engaged business leaders as well as the wider analyst and technology communities with leading research, publications, and industry articles focused on the key trends around sourcing, content management, procurement, and supplier management. A key trend that we're going to focus on today, the digital transformation. So welcome, Konstantin, to today's session.
Thanks so much for that great introduction.
Absolutely. And just to give you a little bit more context before we delve in about Zycus, your host and sponsor for the session today, we are a software provider, in fact, an integrated suite of source-to-pay modules that span the entire procurement process, so across functional domains such as spend analytics, e-sourcing, contract management, supplier management, procure-to-pay, and financial savings management, as well as some of the underlying capabilities like a single integrated or one-view dashboard or request management, one that we'll focus on a little bit today as well. So a comprehensive, holistic suite of integrated tools to enable, in fact, this digital transformation. That'll be the focus of our discussion today. And with that, Konstantin, I'd like for you to give us an overview into the agenda and kick off our discussion today.
Yeah. So today we're going to take a look at the evolving business environment of what it means to do digital transformation and look at the digital transformation of business. And in particular, we're going to try to look at the understanding of what the future looks like for middle market, and then understand how the middle market's addressing technology and look at some of the factors, and then go into an overall review of how it looks and what ways you can enable the digital transformation. So if we move on, Richard, to the next slide, what we'll do here first is take a look at how we define this evolving business environment. So if we can look at what digital transformation is, the look at it at Hackett oftentimes is just a kind of foundational way of defining it. So digital transformation in business services basically means improving customer experiences, the operational efficiency, and ability for really fundamentally changing the way the services are delivered using digital technologies as an enabler. If you look at the graphic, really it's meant to represent kind of the percentage of procurement process cost reduction attributable to digital transformation. If you look at a baseline, we can see, first of all, the peer group often has a larger baseline of cost, and their efforts, we're seeing organizations at around 24% of a cost reduction, as opposed to where the world class, who already have a lower cost baseline, and because some efficiencies that they've already built in, they have a digital transformation savings of around 35. So to enable the decision support, shifting the efforts, and create a business alignment, you need to have certainty in place. But let's look first of all, landscape of the digital transformation. What does that really mean? How do we look at it? So if we move on to the next slide, we have a rendering here of businesses will look at this and what that landscape really looks like. So if you look at macro level areas, we have things like intensifying competition. You keep hearing about mergers and acquisitions happening in the market, margins pressure, global competition, the disruption that's happening with others who are in the space, product and service information out there, business model. And then you have some of the expectations within the business, either shareholders or the stakeholders within the company are saying you need to have leadership, you need to have digital customers, you need agile, you need to have flawless compliance and leadership and be able to extend partner valuing. And then being able to also look at your customer. So from a perspective of procurement, who's our customer? How do we design better? How do we digitalize the engagement? How do we segment our customers and individualize and create even an omni-channel for the relationship that we have with our customers? And then we're enabling that through the digital operations. And this is what we hear so much about in the modern framework today, every day in the news, about mobility in the cloud and social technologies. But we also the evolving technologies around RPA, IoT, blockchain, AI, and some of the things in terms of the analytic insights for big data and analytics and predictive modeling, prescriptive modeling, data integration, and data visualization. So if we harness all this, this is a way of looking at understanding what basically digital transformation is and how you need to get from point A to point B. So on to the next slide. One of the things we're going to take a look at is what that means in terms of the outlook for the middle market. So oftentimes we get really caught up on the market, what's going on in the market. An observation, for instance, is that we get so caught up in the Dow Jones, and if you look at the Dow Jones, it's only the top 30 largest companies in the New York Stock Exchange, 30. Well, if we look at the middle market, we can see the impact is tremendous or the potential. First of all, the size of it can range from anywhere between 1 billion to 8 billion if you're looking at mid-cap stocks, but sometimes you put the range down to 500 million and 1 billion. When we look at the today that we're presenting, we're actually looking at a range between, I think, 300 million to about $3 or $4 billion companies. But, given these different ranges, we can see that middle market represents nearly 200,000 companies compared to the 30 that we talked about. And you employ about 44.5 million people, generating 10 trillion in combined revenue annually in the U.S. economy. We can see it represents 3% of all U.S. companies, and it accounts for a third of the U.S. private sector GDP. So it's considerable in terms of the enterprise level contributions that they're making, and it's estimating the sector contributes nearly 6.2 trillion to the national economy annually. So that, and understanding the impact on employment and just the overall size, it's really important to understand what middle markets need to do to help enable them in digital transformation, and in particular from our discussion here around procurement. So if we go on to the next slide, what we can here is what the middle market's doing for digital transformation. So if we look at this slide, one thing to notice is that the overall procurement function is kind of equivalent over the resources that they have. More percentage say that they don't have the resources and competencies in place, but there's some that say that they do. But if you really look at the middle line there, what's interesting is that they're challenged a little bit more on the strategy, the enterprise digital strategy. How is procurement moving forward with the digital transformation as part of the water strategy and be aligned with those goals? And there you can see some of the numbers where there's some disagreement as well. And then finally, in terms of the procurement function, have they developed a digital transformation strategy themselves? And so all these things in conjunction are what people in procurement today, the leaders in the organizations, are thinking through to say, how do we get involved based on that landscape that I showed us earlier. So if we move to the next slide, one of the things we'll notice is the value drivers are critical. So what value drivers that you need to get to for the procurement function to improve and get to that point within digital transformation. And the number one thing that we see here is the value contribution. We have a lot of research at Hackett around this topic of, procurement getting beyond being recognized for just cost reduction, so getting into, strategic and more value-driven TOC type recognition. And by way of digital transformation, seeing that procurement is going to look to go in those directions into strategic value drivers as opposed to the traditional value drivers they've always been recognized for. You can see here that customer satisfaction is a huge element of what organizations are looking for today, particularly procurement, where they've traditionally been seen as kind of the compliance gate. You know, you need to do this before you need to do this. And they're really seen as providing that kind of customer experience or customer service in a guide buying, say, format. And so these are changing through the technologies that companies are going through. And that's also going to improve. One of the other big areas that they're looking at is the quality of service. How do I improve that? So customer satisfaction, quality, how timely can I get a response? How many options am I giving to the stakeholders that need the services and the products that they're trying to buy within the organization? So they're just some important things to consider, and it even is more highlighted, particularly for middle market companies, as Richard mentioned before, because of some of the resource constraints. And we're going to see that in some of the data. So if we move on to the next slide. This that we often do at Hackett is we kind of take a look at the role of moderation, or looking at how companies are looking at this kind of in terms of an impact. And so one of the things that I did here in terms of this graphic, this came from the, all the data came from the digital transformation study that we just finished earlier this year. And what we did is took a look at an index. Index basically is drawing the conclusion of 0 being none, low, 1 being a moderate influence, and 2 being a major influence. And if you look at the graphic, what's really telling is that there's 2 or 3 areas that really stand out. One is really, if you look at today, the impact so far, the current projected impact of digital transformation, procurement service portfolio is a huge area. So what kind of services are we providing for our customers today? How are we enabling those offerings through technology, through better process? And we see that the impact, the anticipated impact or expected additional future impact, is saying that they're feeling, based on the data, that there's going to be somewhat of a moderate to almost a little bit towards the major aspect of the benefit. Another area is performance levels needed from IT. So the speed, the quality, the ability to really transform through the technology framework, and having IT be able to support that, particularly in areas in migrating more to a SaaS model and able to embed mobility, social, and other aspects of what people are demanding from their technology today, and being able to keep that top line and keeping the high level of performance. The other areas that we feel that are very important is the procurement strategic partnerships that you're going to be able to create through digital transformation. By that, we mean both internal relationships through finance or with the supply chain, but also the strategic relationships that we're going to through things like supplier innovation, which is a real big topic, something we're going to talk about a little bit later in the slides, but it's something that we're seeing more interest in. How do I collaborate with my suppliers and create strategic partnerships with my suppliers in terms of going to market? And really some of the other areas we see in a big difference is procurement talent. This can't be underestimated, because so many procurement organizations are now looking at this and saying, this new dynamic and this new world of digital transformation, what are the talents I'm going to need to have for my procurement team to go being able to deliver? Is it more of an analytics skill? Are we going to be monitoring a lot of the processes are going to be automated through things like RPA or through blockchain, or be able to look at predictive aspects through better lenses, through advanced analytic capabilities? These are the kinds of things that are on the top of mind of all procurement organizations. And in the middle market, because of that resource constraint, these are really even more emphasized compared to other organizations that might be larger. So if we go on to the next slide, what we often do in the research is kind of put together that a matrix that finds the ability to address in terms of the y-axis here, and then the importance aspect on the x-axis. And you look at this a little bit closer, you can see these are all the things that people currently listed as important, and in terms of what the maturity level is. And if you look at the top right, we can hear that procurement states here that the procurement leadership are understanding, they have a commitment to this digital transformation. So there is this commitment to say, yeah, we are going to do this. So that's kind of more of a mature model. But when we look further down on that right-hand side, what concerns, and I kind of put that into a red dot, is there's a concern over procurement cultural acceptance to change. So how are they going to be able to transform themselves, the procurement folks, and able to get this into this kind of new world, if you will? And then another area is the availability of solid business cases to justify digital transformation investment. So that focuses in specifically on that resource allocation. The concern is if I'm not properly allocating my resources and doing projects that I'm piloting that are going to be successful, there's a big anxiety over that because, again, of the resource question. So how are you going to be able to make sure that you're successful with things that you are starting out with that might be brand new to the organization and is, again, tested maybe enterprise-wide or specifically within procurement? So these are some of the things that, again, are top of mind, but then there's other areas, the executive commitment, the ability of the business and IT to impact of the digital transformation, the quality data, things that we've heard of in the past. But these are the two that I really wanted to point out because of the way they fell on the matrix. If we move on to the next slide, what we hear then is how we then build a framework for the digital transformation. So what we have in our digital efforts at Hackett from a research perspective is that we're really focusing on how to understand what that framework looks like. And this is a model that we put together earlier last year that really helps segment and understand what is the breakdown for how to look at that landscape that I put together earlier. Well, one of the work details is really that top line is what's your business strategy objective? Functional digital strategy must align with the overall business strategy, so procurement strategy must align with the overall strategy. And how are we then maximizing the value of our customers? So the value of our customers in this case, again, it would be finance, could be treasury, could be supply chain, but the oi polloi, as we say in the ancient Greek, if you will, or the masses, really, those people that need to come in and just buy something maybe on a one-time basis, coming on a system, and they have no idea how to buy or get what they need, there's going to be that level of frustration. So we need to maximize that customer value. Another, innovation and digitization of products and services. So how quickly, for instance, would be an example of how quickly are we able to enable our suppliers and advance them onto a supplier network to be able to do e-commerce with us, to be able to digitally work with us and moving beyond that, manual transaction-based areas that, procurement has been trying to transform for some time. Business model innovation, how are we innovating our model? What are we doing differently within our procurement organization? Are we embedding centers of excellence? Are we trying to consolidate spend? Are we using different technologies and tools to work together to be innovative with our suppliers? And then the traditional, the most well-known is, again, the cost reduction. Overall, in the end, that is procurement's mantra. That's what we need to do. And how we do that in the digital strategy objectives is with basically 5 capabilities that we're going to delve into deeper as part of this webinar and discuss. So we're going to put some definition around that. But basically, the digital business capabilities are those areas that provide that pillar of support to your digital strategy. So what we're going to talk about is digital customer engagement, and we can see here that that's basically looking at the customer as a 360 model, or create an omni-channel and integrate that within all the different aspects of how people interact with procurement. And then finally, we ultimately provide the personalization to the buyers or even the procurement users are in procurement to personalize their dashboards or be able to make sure that they have a model that they can work within that helps within with their particular structure, whether it's in sourcing or procurement or even working with payables. Then we have digital workforce. How are those workers enabled? What kind of knowledge do they need to have these digital skills? And then how do we unify that collaborative way and unify that knowledge? The organization from a service is really the automation. How easy is it to have a no PO invoice kind of process, or how easy is it to orchestrate all the services that need to happen and all the content, all the knowledge that we're developing as part of this process? What can we do to improve that and create repositories so the people that come along or the people that get enabled know where that information is? And finally, the ecosystem, right? Do we have a network? How do we work with our third parties? How do we have that knowledge on that network? What type of OT are we embedding within the ecosystem so that I can go from a mobile device to a laptop to a desktop within seconds and not have to worry about how things are rendered and be able to easily understand how things work or get alerts or information based on what's happening at any point in time within the supply chain, whether it's indirect or direct. And then finally, we look at the analytics-driven business insight. This is that market analytics, the customer analytics, operational and financial that we're going to use to build and understand what's happening within the ecosystem. And based here, we have our digital IT capabilities, all the things that IT is providing us or enabling us as part of those business capabilities that we have in procurement, from technology innovation, the architecture, the cybersecurity, the service delivery, and the data and analytics that they're helping us get within the enterprise. So let's take a look then at each of these areas. And what we're going to do is take a look at the definition of the pillar and kind of talk about what the market is doing compared to everybody else and where their importance lies. So if we move on to the next slide. The 4 pillars, and again, the 4 pillars are support, digital customer engagement, digital workforce, digital service optimization, digital system, and analytics-driven insight. So if we move and we distill this down further, we will go on to the next slide. The first, I believe, is digital customer engagement. So if we look at what that means, what does it mean to have a digital customer enablement of that? So if we define it, it's basically the design optimized customer experiences through digital integration and leveraging data. And if we look at this model, the 2 things that the middle market is most focused on compared to everybody else is really the ability to search for information, conduct transactions, and be able to easily monitor status and make inquiries through self-service features. And the self-service concept is really, really critical because of the FTE liability that middle market has, where they may not have as many resources to help with folks, so that self-service feature makes it easier for people to get what they need and know where they go. The second is really then also procurement-facing systems. There's been so much talk about the UI, UX, the experience, the usability of the tool. Now that we're seeing in this kind of second generation of technologies that are being rolled out within a cloud framework, the importance of how easy it is to buy something without really someone giving you a training manual. So if you think of the experiences of going to an Amazon or to Google, we're going to reflect a lot of that now in the technologies. So to enable that customer engagement, these personalizations, the experience optimization, the mobility support really needs to be there, particularly for the middle market because of those resource constraints. So if we're going to move to a demo, I believe, that's talk a little bit about some of this that we're sharing within the presentation. So Richard Palami.
Yeah, and I think this framework is really helpful as we move through the digital transformation process, and starting with this notion of digital customer engagement and how you create this omni-channel experience. I wanted to share a brief video that's going to highlight kind of practices in this area. We call it iRequest is the name of a tool developed for request management. So if you think about the way this process often works today, most organizations, is it starts with an end user, initiates a request to the procurement function through probably some combination of either emails or phone calls. The challenge with that process, of course, is that as we go ahead and play video now, is that there's a lack of transparency and a lack of visibility and a certain latency in the process. So an email or a phone call to procurement as the requester, days go by, and procurement doesn't have all the information that they need. What exactly is the requirement? When it's needed, has it been approved? Is there budget? So it's an inefficient process. We want to show you a vision how that changes with personalized portal. Here I'm Sandy, and I log into this portal, and it's customized to my particular needs. And I get directly to the type of request that I need to raise. It could be to negotiate a contract, onboard a supplier, or I need help with an RFQ. Along the way, I'm given guidance with the relevant policies and procedures, or AQs. So we'll take a look at a specific use case. Again, I'm a marketing manager. I need a new app developed for a conference. So I'm guided directly to a prototype of form. form, seen form in this case, and prompted through a wizard type of interface to provide all the relevant details for what I require. And when I submit my request, I have visibility to the approval path that my request is going to follow. It's a flexible and conditional approval process. Here I'm the approver, I'm the vice president at my desktop, but I could just as easily be viewing and approving this request from a mobile device, such as a smartphone or a tablet. And the key from a procurement standpoint is then when it lands on my desk as the procurement manager, I know this request has been properly approved and prioritized for me to work on. It's on budget, it's got the approvals, and I can begin fulfilling that request. And one of the things that I can do is, because I've got all the specifications provided by the end user, is just flip that information directly into the request for quote in this case, to initiate that sourcing event efficiently and effectively, and track the process and status of the event. I've got a full audit trail to review the results. And now from an end user standpoint, I've got a collaborative platform with procurement. I can, on a self-service basis, go in and see what is the disposition and status of my request. If I need to answer questions or have questions of procurement, I've got that discussion thread gone back and forth, and the system is tracking all of that. So you can see in this brief video how to really change the equation and transform the process to improve collaboration and enhance the customer experience as well as procurement's productivity, increase the visibility, and add that on a self-service basis to improve customer satisfaction. Seamless process integration all the way from the initiation of the request through the execution and fulfillment of that request. I think that's just a brief look at how technology can enable this type of digital customer engagement. I'm going to share another video a little while later as we go through the framework.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard, for that. So as we now kind of embody the visual of what a landscape would look like, we're going to continue through the pillars that we talked about to understand what that really means. So we first talked about, again, the one we just finished, which was the customer engagement. Now, if we look at the digital workforce, sorry, that should say digital workforce on the top, the procurement workforce is allowing the organization to be able to use the digital tools and platforms to maximize the productivity, IP creation, and knowledge contribution of the workers that are doing this for them. If we look here at the data, the number one area for the middle market, at least, is really around this decision-making processes supported by advanced analytical tools so that they really know what's happening within the organization and are able to optimize those decisions. Some of the areas are the digital tools, the collaborative talent and IP development, the multimedia. You're seeing the embedding of social media, teleconferencing within technologies, the likes of a Slack or Skype that we're able to now use and understand to be able to better collaborate. And we're also seeing at the bottom there what Richard showed as procurement workers having access to very role-specific business application functionality required to effectively execute that work. And the more role-specific it is, particularly for a middle market organization, the easier it is for them to get their job done, but then also for the infrequent buyer to be able to save certain types of searches or be able to save certain types of shopping carts that are less frequent, that makes that that experience that much better and improves the overall customer satisfaction. Again, one of the areas that we're looking for as a driver. If we move to the next pillar, this now really looking at the service optimization. So that's the actual service optimization. Next slide. There we go. Oh, sorry, these things are a little off. So look at the service optimization. What we're looking for here is really how to use digital tools to optimize the delivery for the business, execute the underlying process. So if we here, this is one of the first areas where we see where the market it actually has a bigger interest than the overall. And in particular, what we see is really this common procurement transaction processes are automated to ensure universally available business applications. So ready to go from procure to pay framework in a very simple and precise way, save time and efficiency, something that the middle market is very much looking for. We could also see here more of a yearning or desire to have the non-digital content in a digitized and managed format. So how do we create content that's stored and managed to be added to enterprise knowledge, and making it easier, as I was talking about before, to better understand what that content is, how do you leverage it, how do you improve on those systems. Some of the areas that we're seeing, again, interest is status and progress of procurement processes, the visibility in real time. When something happens, how easily am I able to see the reaction to that? And then one of the other expanding areas is really the automation and making simple manual tasks automated. And this is something we're seeing quite a bit of in the development of the RPA framework, and robotic process automation. So being able to take very singular tasks and making those automated through a bot process, so that it saves a lot of time and things that we're traditionally having to be manually entered in a system or connecting two systems that may not be connected today. And in some cases, a lot of the discussion that we're having around RPA is really, it's a way for it to be connected and automated that may not be connected today, and it's elevating that process and making things more efficient and accurate over time. And then the last thing is that workflow that Richard was talking about. Procurement workflows are automated, approval, exception handling are automated, and make it really easy and understandable based on the process that's at hand, depending upon whether you're buying marketing or other types of services, or you're trying to customize and configure something for conference. So those are different types of things that could create complexity. And having those procurement workflows automated is a real critical factor overall. If we move to the next one, I'm going to then move on to the digital ecosystem, right? So what does this ecosystem really need to look like? Well, the thing that becomes really stand out in terms of the data was that the IT of service providers, including BPOs, are integrated data exchange electronically. And seeing here is there's a strong desire, particularly for the middle market, to really engage in a more ecosystem-like environment. For us, what we're seeing in the trending from a data standpoint is that it's a middle market is looking now to enhance more capability in areas like supplier networks, or enabling more supplier portals, or be able to create more digital formats for the information that they're sending and receiving between buyer and supplier. This is really reflected in this number in terms of the amount of interest that's there for the middle market. The other big significant area is this integration in corporate systems with the ability to share information like inventory levels, usage data, and expected delivery times. This is particularly important for stocked items or inventoried items for the indirect and also for the direct side for how you're using that from an inventory standpoint. So whether you're looking at it from an indirect or direct standpoint, these areas, this usage and understanding of where things are at any point in the supply chain or the demand chain, you have a visibility into that. Final area that we're going to look at is, again, that bottom area, which is really the analytics. Look at the top priorities from an analytics-driven aspect is really here concern over risk. So here at the top line, procurement operational risk versus operational impact and exposure analyzed and quantified. Because of that resource area that we were talking about with the middle market, the concern is that any investment that they make, any relationship that they build might have a much larger impact than a larger organization that might be more buffeted with a larger supply base, might not be as impacted. And depending upon the industry or the geography of that supplier, there's a concern in understanding what are those risks, how do I react to them, how do I manage the supply risk and the performance, and be able to better react to anything that might be caused from, say, a disruption or exposure to risk, and better understand that from an analytic framework. The area that we see here from a top priority that is, again, higher than the last one is the periodic operational procurement planning and budgeting. Anything that we've seen from a value aspect of procurement is really being able to take the performance of procurement as a function, the ability to know where they've performed in terms of cost reduction, and having that really closely tied to the budgeting cycle. This has certainly been a challenge for organizations that don't have that visibility because things may have changed, contracts may have changed, pricing might have gone up, or procurement finance haven't been in sync what the expectation is for a particular category, and as a result, procurement may not be getting recognized for the efforts that they have, or some areas like avoidance that maybe not be recognized from a standpoint, but ability to measure and understand how they've benefited from the value that procurement's providing. So the ability to tie the budget plan, the procurement planning, budgeting, and forecasting process as a part of the analytical framework is really critical, again, for enhancing and enabling the procurement organization's value as they go from that cost-driven model to more of a strategic one. So as we get those 5 pillars, we now can understand, well, these are the things that we're bringing together. So now we're going to have another video that the Zycus team is going to present on again, understanding the digital transformation framework. Richard?
Yeah, Tina, and just to set this up before we roll video, this is going to be the sequel to the first video I presented. And in the first one, we looked at the digital customer engagement primarily from the aspect of that end user stakeholder in the business. How can we provide that front-end portal to the procurement process and full visibility to what goes on in the procurement process? But now we're going to focus on a procurement user, the procurement professional, and how to engage that digital workforce, optimize the service delivery, enable analytics-driven insights, all those other 4 pillars that you mentioned, more from the procurement standpoint. So if we will go ahead and roll the video here, the sequel. This is we call it Dewdrops, but it's a next-generation digital user experience. So I want to give some insights to what that experience looks like from a procurement user standpoint. And you've got a home page that could be customized and to the particular user, either from a strategic procurement or more operational aspect, or go to one place and have access to all the modules and all the activity that I've got going on. In this case, it's a little more focused around transactional procurement, POs, invoices, etc. But I can track all of my activities. Some that are in process, I can go back and resume, pick up where I left off. I can navigate to any of the modules across source to pay that I have access to. I've got a customized dashboard with smart analytics to help guide my decision-making process as I go through. And I can easily initiate events, such as a one-page creation for a sourcing event in this particular example. It's all pre-configured with the workflow. I've got one place to go then to track the status on any of my events. So I can see when I've created an RFQ, have suppliers responded? Where am I in this process? I can also very easily replicate repetitive type of purchases. Maybe just go in and access a kind of a saved card, if you will, and just update if I've got the required by date. Maybe the quantities change, but for all aspects, I can simply reuse and replicate frequent purchase activities to really speed the process and make it much more efficient as I manage my tasks between strategic or transactional activities. I also got this platform for collaboration, external suppliers or internal stakeholders, and the ability then to keep that trail of that discussion thread as I go through the process. So just a quick glimpse again here at the next generation user interface really address all these things about how do I engage that digital workforce that's more technically savvy than ever, has certain expectations around highly usable and user-friendly platform. All the way, optimizing that service delivery and fusing the decision-making process with advanced analytics and the insights that they can bring. So back to
So that video, again, further enhances some of the things that we're talking about within that framework. And the last slide I'm going to show you here before we talk a little bit more about technology is, again, in the end, we asked a question in the digital transformation study that said, drivers that are targeted for improvement in completing the procurement digital transformation projects. And coming from that middle market perspective, things we just kept emphasizing throughout this webinar is the fact that, business value is one of the hugest drivers for them because of that concern to say, look, if I'm going to be investing in this project or an investment in a e-procurement or e-sourcing, I need to really understand what I'm going to get out of it. That then also improve the overall quality of service that we talked about before. Get better cycle time, provide me agility, get the customer satisfaction overall, and improve operating costs. Really needs to go back to that business proposition. So any people that are going through this transformation process, particularly in the middle market, are looking for that to justify what they're trying to do and take them to the next step. So if we look at the next set of slides, what we can do is take a look at, well, how are they looking at this from a technology perspective? We talked about the digitization of the process. We talked about those efforts, the things that they need to have done. If we take a look at where they're at today and where they're going and what they're looking at, the thing that's very interesting here is, first of all, scorecard, dashboard, performance of procurement is the most completed project out of pretty much all the other criteria or other areas that we have listed here. Second, it's kind of no surprise, is really e-procurement and buying. But if you look at the exploring and piloting, what's very interesting there is that we're seeing kind of a second generation evolution of folks looking to move maybe beyond an on-premise model or maybe beyond an ERP model, looking at another way of getting e-procurement done based on customer satisfaction and process design, flexibility that they need in this kind of digital form. We're also seeing this in source auctions, again, exploring, piloting. But what's really interesting is if you look at where most exploration is happening, really around this supplier framework. For instance, at supplier risk management, 38% of organizations are exploring this because of this concern over risk with their supply base. We're seeing supply innovation as a huge area. I talked about this earlier, how to better work and collaborate with my suppliers, what type of technology can I use to do that. And then also an area that we've seen tremendous change in terms of adoption and looking at how to use it within an operational framework is contract management. We see 50% of organizations are really looking to kind of take it beyond that repository model and looking at workflows or looking at actually authoring and executing contracts and collaborating with third parties with a contract management system. And we could also see areas like supplier master data where there's constant exploration. Some have explored, some have completed, but an ongoing challenge there with master data. And we have a slide that shows that later on. And finally, at the bottom, we have compliance management. Organizations are looking to do, and they're tying a lot of that with areas like supply management and contract management. Then some are looking at even at the supply chain, looking at how to use a dynamic discounting or supply chain finance as part of their model. So this gives a good framework for where the middle market is and where they're trying to now maybe go next and how they're trying to get there and enabling transformation through some of these capabilities. If we move to the next slide, another aspect to this is also explaining where they're at from an analytics framework. And what we can hear is that 44% of companies have got an analytics tool in place. They've got it used for the procurement function, and some have established some centers of excellence. But it's really interesting is this MDM that I mentioned before, establishing or improving data stewardship, data governance. For the larger companies, we're seeing that this is an ongoing initiative. It's something that they're constantly trying to get a better grasp of, to get a better insight into the data and information that they're collecting, being able to make more efficiency and insight into how they can react to that. We're all seeing quite a bit of exploration, not so much piloting, but quite a bit of exploration in AI, artificial intelligence, and cognitive computing based on predictive analytics capabilities. So to automatically categorize or prescribe or predict or anticipate what people should be buying, when they should be buying, how it looks based on the market, whether it's some kind of disruption in the market, in the supply chain, or just better being able to anticipate what should be doing and when they're doing it, and tying that into actually a buying framework. And then finally, some of the other areas like updating analytical tool sets. Maybe I'm going to improve the tool set that I want to use, or looking at maybe more of a modern architecture for supporting the advanced analytics and improving the visualization and capability. So, making it more self-service driven analytics where I can click and drill down into things that are very easily accessible as a user of procurement or even as a buyer. Move on to the last slide. I believe what shows us here is the kind of the overall view of the driver. So if you look at how to consolidate and categorize everything that we're seeing, how technology is looking, you can see that a lot of market organizations are still looking for that software as a service model. You know, some haven't even transformed into an on-demand or a cloud model. They might be still using an on-premise look. And so looking at software as a service, going to the cloud is something that more the middle market's looking at that value driver. And again, as we talked about earlier, that advanced analytics, how they're getting there, how they're moving forward in that with prescriptive, predictive, how they're using the AI and cognitive to try to get there. We could also see social media and collaboration is a big interest. Mobile computing is not as high. And then, again, kind of in the early development cycles for some of the more advanced areas like robotic process automation isn't quite yet there for the middle market. Finally, the cognitive and the AI, something that they're looking into, but they're not really going to be investing quite a bit into that just as yet. They're more focused on those kind of mainstream technologies, the areas of getting their bundle of their software, our cloud, and in a framework that works, that's working on a workflow basis, and get advanced analytics in place to improve. And it includes MDM efforts as well as improving that visual framework that we showed in some of the previous slides. So what I'd like to do now is move this over to talk a little bit more about how Zycus is addressing the middle market from a technology framework.
Thanks so much, Constantine. No more videos now, but I did want to spend a few minutes to drill into some of the specific challenges that we see in the mid-market procurement function, and the solution that we've devised and configured to specifically address some of those mid-market specific challenges. And when we look at the mid-market, first of all, it's a resource challenge. Staffing for the procurement department, where mid-market organizations are in fact growing very rapidly, the FTE, the headcount allocated to procurement, has simply not kept pace with the growth in the business or the increased complexity in doing business. And most organizations face a reality that headcounts are, relatively flat at best. So they're not getting more resources, and the resources that they have, those existing FTEs, tend to be consumed by more tactical activities. You have to make sure that you can ensure availability of supply, process orders, pay invoices, those kinds of things. And across industries, we see the graphic here from CAPS Research, the Center for Advanced Purchasing Studies, some variability from industry to industry on how they allocate resource between strategic activities and the more tactical or transactional activities. But across all industries, 62% of resources, according to the CAPS data, are allocated to tactical or transactional activities compared to just 38% strategic pursuits. And I would postulate that is even more pronounced in the mid-market, where there are few resources to begin with. More of the resources get consumed with these tactical activities. The other is rampant maverick spend. So as businesses grow and they don't have the adequate controls or systems in place, users tend to do whatever is expedient to get the goods or services that they need. And as a result, according to the data, Constantine, that you and Hackett have provided, the average organization has just 44% of their spend come to contract. So that's savings leakage, which is a real missed opportunity for savings for many organizations. And not only does non-compliant spend result in lost savings, but the other thing that's vexing to many of these organizations, they have very limited spend visibility or process transparency. Non-compliant purchases occur outside of the system. Those transactions are also often miscoded or misclassified. So it does provide the insights for strategic sourcing. More, the auditors, be they external or internal, if you can't see an audit trail that demonstrates effective controls over purchases, they're apt to cite those deficiencies in their audit memos. What we see specific to mid-market organizations is they're often behind the curve somewhat on previous generation technology, so antiquated systems they're struggling to make do with, and in many cases which they've outgrown, and they really don't have the resources to test in new technologies because many times historically the price tag on best-of-breed technologies has been out of reach for most mid-market organizations, who nevertheless have to achieve very aggressive savings goals. And one strategies for growth in the mid-market in particular is growth through acquisition, through merger and acquisition activity. And sometimes those M&As are justified based on expected cost synergies to come from the procurement function. So in particular, these organizations have very aggressive savings targets to hit. And the challenge that they're facing is as they grow and globalize in many cases, there's a proliferation of supply base. No efficient means of onboarding suppliers and no single version of the truth when it comes to suppliers. So really a perfect storm of challenges for mid-market organizations. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk about the Zycus Genesis program and how we really are addressing that critical first step towards digitization for mid-market organizations, which is really to automate the transactional procurement process. You really can't get as strategic as you want to be until you've done the basics, done it in an efficient and effective way. So our process diagram here really shows the scope of this Genesis program, which is really a digitized process for onboarding suppliers, processing transactions, requisitions, POs, and invoices, and closing the loop with posting those transactions to the general ledger to have that single version of truth, complete processes as it relates to procurement transaction automation. From a functional standpoint, it really starts with a robust procure-to-pay capability that's then augmented with a supplier information management module to efficiently onboard and enable the supply base, as well as a contract repository to enable the full range of purchases, not just from catalog-based purchases, but catalog-based as well. So where the contract, especially for services that make up such a large percentage of spend for organizations, that catalog becomes the de facto, that contract becomes the de facto catalog, if you will. So the next slide, I'll talk specifically about the value proposition that this Genesis entails for mid-market customers in particular. This is mid-market organizations will now have access to a best-in-class PERC solution. So Zycus has been recognized as a leader by both Gartner and Forrester as an example, and provide that type of engaging digital customer experience using guided buying, user experience to drive rapid adoption of the solutions. Part of rapid adoption is being able to actually get the solutions implemented and up and running quickly as well. So mid-market organizations don't have the luxury of long implementation cycles that span multiple months or even years. In this case, they're looking for something that can get rolled out and implemented on a very fast-track basis on the order of 8 to 12 weeks by leveraging out-of-the-box best practices and expertise, by leveraging cloud delivery platforms that minimize IT support, and lastly, a solution that's easy to buy and easy to own. So it's affordable, it's a fixed, predictable annual expense that creates a strong ROI justification and time to value. Bottom line here is getting up and running in less than 90 days at about the cost of FTE fully loaded compensation benefits. So what I'll share with you here, if we go to the next slide, is just how can this program enable mid-market customers to raise top performer status? How can we enable the three characteristics of top P2P performers? Again, here, Constantine, from research that you've done at Hackett, the first characteristic being that focus on internal stakeholders. and is realized in the form of much higher compliance, that the purchasing process drives requisitioners to the preferred channels, and much more frequently for top performers, 85% of the time, as compared to others. And with this Genesis solution, we're letting artificial intelligence to enable the guided buying process to achieve this type of top performer status by steering users only to the relevant categories and preferred suppliers, by simplifying the along the way, defaulting for the end user, for example, the category and GL information and ship to and bill to, all which drives a much higher degree of adoption and compliance. Characteristic digitizing the information includes the ability for top performers to steer a much higher percentage of their total spend to those preferred contracted suppliers. And in this case, the Genesis solution really focuses on a feature that we call contract lock. And it speaks to the importance of integrating contract management into procure to pay, because after all, so much of the spending is for non-catalog, especially services type things, where you need contracts visible at the point of onboarding to be able to flip pricing data right from the contract into a catalog where appropriate, at point of requisition, those non-catalog items to pull in the applicable pricing and terms from the contract. At point of PO, to make sure you're cross-referencing the contract on PO to drive a compliant, not only purchase order, but return invoice from the supplier. And for all those non-PO invoices, having contract to refer to helps to manage those exceptions for the invoice processing efficiency. And the last point here, process automation, the third characteristic. Customers have a much higher degree of automated, no-touch electronic POs, almost twice as frequently, almost 4 times as frequently, electronic invoices. And that all comes down to enabling the supply base. So focusing, as with the Genesis program, on how do I enable the 20% of suppliers that account for 80% of the transactions quickly to get critical mass of process automation throughout the process. And with that, let me turn it back to you, Constantine, just for some closing thoughts.
Absolutely. So with the closing thought, if we move on to the kind of digital transformation is different today, and kind of move on to the next slide, three things to kind of take away from this from our perspective, ways of doing things. It's beyond just automating existing processes. It's kind of finding something in completely new ways and enabling new technologies like cloud, like big data, like RPA, like social media. It's focusing on a customer-centric approach, as we talked about earlier, moving beyond internally focused transformation, but designing from the outside in, starting with what our customers need, what our stakeholders need from a procurement perspective, and finding new ways to engage that customer. What internally, stakeholders are working with our suppliers as well. And finally, that velocity of change. How quickly can we respond? Embrace a fail-fast philosophy, learn from your challenges, how to transform, execute pilots in targeted areas, and scale up rapidly where you're finding success. And then finally, shifting the focus from discrete projects, looking at digital transformation as kind of a continuous transformation and looking at how to improve digitally and from an enterprise perspective and from procurement. That's pretty much what we have for today. I think we might have some time for some questions, Richard, if we want to open it up.
We don't have much time, of course, because I know we wouldn't, because we have a lot of content, and thanks for all that compelling data that you've shared with us, Constantine, and the roadmap for digital transformation. That's great. Maybe just one quick question. You brought up the topic earlier about ROI, and you showed progress to date that have undertaken digital transformation projects, and that they're part of the way towards the end goal, but not fully there. What do you say about the way that you've seen organizations try to quantify the ROI potential of digital transformation as a way to justify justify investment in this area?
I think the point taken at the bottom there is really the one that I made earlier with making the understanding of creating pilots and projects, because so many organizations are still kind of in this early phase and they're still trying to grasp what that is. And so I highly suggest that you look at these processes that have been looking for major effort of improvement. And I've seen organizations focusing particularly on the area of guided buying. That's been a huge area of interest, and it's really helped transform the organizations that are looking at the procurement organization. And then some of the other areas is really around the mobility and the accessibility of information and how easy it is to get things done. And so the ROI we've seen there has been anywhere between 4 to 10 times the investment because of that ability to create more efficiencies as well as lowering the cost of doing business internally. So some of the things that we've seen and where we're seeing a lot of organizations getting their start.
Constantine, and thanks again for a great presentation. I'll just close here with our contact information. So we'll have to follow up on some additional questions, and if others occur to folks as they get the slide deck, which will be sent out in the next day or so following the webcast, feel free to also reach out to Constantine or myself, and we'd be glad to follow up with additional questions that you may have. So again, thanks, Constantine. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Have a great day ahead.